All right. So, welcome to another casual podcast. I haven't recorded in I don't know how long now. So, this is definitely like a landmark because this is the first video one I've done so far. So, everybody, this is my buddy Vlad. This is actually the first time that we have I don't want to say spoken face to face, but kind of a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we've gone back and forth online here and there.
Yeah, so me and Vlad are in the same space, which is still like very ambiguous and broad, kind of, because it's like you do like UI UX. We won't get into that entirely, but is that what you're specializing in?
Yes, like product design to be specific.
Okay, so mainly with any type of particular like realm of application, or is it?
Mostly B2B tools. So
Oh,
I work
nice.
at an agency that just focuses on building B2B solutions right now. So the majority of
Oh,
my
that's
work
dope.
just focuses on product design, but of course, product design is and will always consist of UI and UX design.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Cool, cool, good stuff. All right, so not to bore you guys with that type of stuff, that's just me geeking out a little bit. So
Hmm.
before we get into this, I want to make a point to say this. So we're going to be on YouTube and Instagram and all this stuff. So I'm not saying I'm saying this because you have to cushion stuff for people all the time.
Right.
YouTube, if you take this down, I'm not one to say that you're racist, but I'm just going to do it to kind of use your own type of platform against you. Vlad and I, we are not of what you would call Caucasian. We're both Latinos, and I'm sure that you have a bunch of other stuff in your blood as well as I do. So if you guys take this down, I'm going to say that you guys are racist. So regardless of our opinions, don't take it
Absolutely,
down.
you have absolutely. That's the way you have to play the Prussian Olympics game with them because that's how it is. Sometimes you have to
Oh,
play
seriously.
by their own rules. Um, yeah, and just to add on top of that, I'm also a DACA recipient, so I'm also part
Oh,
of that community. I just did an article in last August, no, sorry, last November with the LA Times. So I've been very outspoken about immigration issues.
nice.
So yeah, YouTube, please don't take this down. Don't shut down immigrant voices.
For real, seriously. If you do, I want to be all over Twitter spamming you guys. Um, so before, okay, we're going to get into the very obvious situation that's going on right now around the country in
Right.
regards to the death of Mr. Floyd and whatnot. But where is your family from
My family is
specifically?
originally from Monterrey, Nuevo León. I was also
Oh,
born
okay.
in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's where they're currently residing.
How long have you been here?
I've been here since I was 9 years old. So,
Nice.
I'm doing the math, maybe 15 years now.
In the Bay, or were you down south, or what?
No, no, the Bay Area. So, San Jose. So I was raised in San Jose all my life.
Oh, that's dope. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So
I've
you
moved from city to city, San Francisco, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's crazy. So you guys, that was a long trip then. So most people like when they come, they're like, we're gonna
Mhm.
stick around Murrieta, San Diego, LA, right? So you guys went
Yeah,
far.
yeah, yeah. That's true. Now, I mean, yeah, it's not as far as some people. They'll end up like I'm always curious when Latinos end up in like Illinois or
Yeah,
somewhere in the
seriously,
Midwest. But yeah, even in the Bay Area, like it's not LA or San Diego as most people end up.
for real. Let me ask your opinion on this real quick before we get into it. So
Hmm.
like I'm like 60% like indigenous, right? But I'm
Okay.
obviously when you say that, like even a lot of the people that were over here, they could have came from south of what we look at as the border today, right?
Right.
Like, what do you do? Because so some people, when I say that, they're like, "Oh, you're actually Latino," especially in California. It's like if you're brown, everyone's basically
Hmm.
Latino, no matter where you're from. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, what do you think about that, really quick? Do you
I
consider like
mean,
indigenous people Latino? Is it Latino indigenous? People get annoyed with me when I just say indigenous. Sometimes they're like, "No, you're Latino. You don't care about calling yourself Latino or whatever."
yeah. Well, I think it depends, right? And I think it's important to know that there is some clout with the word indigenous,
Yeah,
right?
there is.
There's
There
some
is.
clout, right? Like
Yeah,
for
yeah,
example, a lot of Latinos will then often will always claim their indigenous side of their own roots, but you'll look at them and they're as Caucasian as a Brandon or
yeah, yeah.
or
Or some
Jake
dude from
or
Jalisco
Ryan.
or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they'll always say, my Mexican roots, my indigenous roots. I'm like, my man, you're a lot more Spanish than you are indigenous. Sorry
Yeah,
to break
yeah,
it to you,
yeah.
but that's just because the climate has given a lot of clout to saying things like that are equivalent with quote unquote what's perceived to be oppressive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
because being indigenous is synonymous with oppression, I think a lot of people just like to claim that they are indigenous. I'm not saying that you're falsely claiming you're indigenous. I
No,
just
no,
think
no, I
that
don't take it that way at
by
all.
yeah, yeah, by no means should you allow people to, I don't know, either validate it or not.
No, for
It's
sure.
fine. I don't really Can't imagine.
Ironically, it's ironically it is the very, for lack of better words, I'm not like PC with this stuff. It's just whitewashed Mexican people. You know what I
Right.
mean? That's really
hmm
what it is. And
But
not that there's
actually,
anything wrong with that, but I'm just saying.
right. But other than that, I don't know. I mean, I have no strong
Ski,
opinion on
yeah,
to
yeah,
say, well, if you're indigenous and you're from this region, if you're this indigenous, and I don't have a strong opinion on that.
yeah. Okay. So also before we get into this, I don't, dude. Like I watched one of Vlad's videos. That's why I want to have him on here. And it seemed like we had a very similar perspective. Obviously, like no one aligns entirely, but we had a very similar perspective on the situations that are happening right now. And it was very like getting away from the identity politics side of everything and trying to rationalize the micro situations to try to come up with some theoretical solution, even if there's no solution that you've come up with. It looked like you were going in that direction. So also, if we disagree on micro things, like I don't even care, dude. Like I don't take that stuff personal, just so you know too. And then
Right. No. I think it's
yeah,
healthy
yeah,
to even have disagreements, right?
for
It
sure.
means we're expressing our thoughts here. But yeah, you're 100% right. I think what I was trying to do is kind of parse through the very like I said, the very dense and segregated and polarized climate right now. And I think naturally when you have tragic events like the ones that took place, like George Floyd's passing, then people are going to have strong emotions. And when you have strong emotions brewing, then you have reactions, right? And I think what we're seeing right now, the burning of cities across the country, they're just reactions to, a lot of people having strong feelings about this. However, if there's something I've learned abstract from, I'm a big boxing fan.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Floyd Mayweather. He's smart, man. One of the things I realized is when you make decisions, which is when you react to things, you're not you're not being smart about it. You're not planning ahead. And I am afraid that a lot of people are getting caught in this wave of just reacting, and it's not necessarily leading to anything productive, which again is what I was trying to do. And even yesterday I had outlined three pretty good objective goals that I think could be an outcome of all of this manifestation of feelings.
dude. Same thing. That's basically what I've been doing for the last like 2 or 3 days. I've been being a little bit more vocal on like I have different contexts and the way I address things on different like platforms, honestly. And like Facebook is where I just air out a lot of that stuff because it's just like people I know personally, and I know people will respond there. Whereas like my other platforms like YouTube, if I talk about this all the time, nobody's gonna care. You know what I mean? But
Right.
Facebook, I do get a little bit more conversation. But when I was on there, people were like, it was an all or nothing mentality, and it
hmm
was like they were treating it so surface level and not allowing the conversation to get any further. So when I was hearing you talk about the correlation and the causation of, and I don't mean to speak for you, but if correct me if I'm wrong, I'll let you kind of go into it on your own after this. Well, you were saying that you do see that there is a correlation in this situation between race and police brutality. You don't necessarily, you're not necessarily saying that you believe race is the full on blown catalyst to the situation, right? And you think that there's
Correct.
obviously there's other factors, a lot of other factors that go into. There's some that weigh more than others. And I was like, I want to hear you speak more on it, but I agree, but I don't disagree either. This was how I took it from when I looked up from my perspective and everything going on. I was like, okay, I have the same upfront perspective as you. You hit it to a T. That's exactly what I'm thinking. I also thought that's not a hill I'm prepared to die on, especially if people are like it's racism, it's racism.
hmm
I'm like, okay, like if you want if that's what you're saying it is, I'll take your word for it. Now
hmm
let's move the conversation forward because like this man is dead. Where do we
Right.
go from here? You know what I mean? But explain to everyone like your perspective on it because I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So what I was trying to get to is I was trying to explain to people that correlation and causality are two different things, right? And when you are looking at a situation like the one that transpired here, and you're looking at it through a specific lens, then you're going to try to make it fit that scenario. Now, I was I think it was important for me to give the disclaimer that I'm not saying race didn't have a factor in what we saw. It could have, right? It very well could have. It could have been present. There could have been a racist element present. It's very difficult to prove. So what I was trying to say ultimately is that a lot of these cases that keep popping up, because the death of George Floyd unfortunately lends to a larger archive of just footage of police murdering and brutalizing citizens. And the bigger picture here is not necessarily racism as the catalyst, but rather classism, right? So the correlation is just that normally and typically the people who do have a lot more resources tend to be Caucasian and actually Asian, if you look at statistics,
Yeah,
who
especially in the
have,
Bay, you'll see that like
especially the
crazy.
Bay.
Seriously.
Exactly. So and vice versa, the people who do not have um resources, very little resources or socioeconomic power, are actually people of color, right? And that's where the correlation happens. So I've always said, unfortunately the police seem to have a certain type of areas of focus, and they usually tend to be socioeconomic areas, impoverished areas, where they will do the majority of their policing, and they will most certainly always protect certain businesses of certain type of wealth, certain neighborhoods. And again, the correlation there is maybe these are predominantly white neighborhoods, not necessarily that these police officers are racist, because again, you can have a diversity in your police department. It could be a black officer, an Asian officer. And by the way, that's why I threw it in there, because I know liberals like to play oppression Olympics there. The two of
100%.
those officers were actually of Asian descent, right? And I just think that when you look at it through a correlation, not only does it become more difficult to prove and to have any meaningful legislation behind it, it it boils up, or it starts to brew an environment that is just going to lead to reactions like the ones we're seeing right now. So I had some people reach out and they were like, "Oh, Vlad, that's a very interesting, but let me disagree on this, let me disagree on that." And then I left them a question, right, something to ponder, and I told them, I asked them, I was like, Give me an example of a rich Latino or a rich black man, black woman who is famous or wealthy that we saw a video of them being um, killed by police officers. Just name me one. Name me a Floyd Mayweather equivalent, an NFL player. How many times have we seen NFL players commit domestic violence, boxers, et cetera, et
OJ got
cetera?
away with murder.
OJ got
OJ
away
got
with
away with
murder.
murder.
Exactly. But they weren't. When you see those dash cam footages of DUIs on NBA players, NFL players, they are sit down on the curb. They understand who they're dealing with, right? Because they know this person has resources. I need to be careful not to exploit this person, or maybe use excessive force, because they might have access to good lawyers. They might know someone. So again, that hesitation from police isn't because they are white necessarily. It could be. This is what I'm saying. It could be. I'm not dismissing racism. I'm
No.
just saying it just seems that the actual catalyst there is classism. And if you've got money, the police, um, I think it's easier for them to be on your side. If you donate to a police organization, they'll give you plate covers. I don't know if you know the 1199 Foundation. Have you
No.
heard of 1199 Foundation? Is the I believe the retirement pension for CHP officers.
Okay.
Now, people are welcome to donate, and you make a pledge, and you give I believe is an annual donation, and in return they give you a set of let's say goods, right? Could be a pen, it could be a calendar, depending on the tier in which you donated. And there'll be a certain tier where you'll earn what these plate covers, right? It's almost like a nice little gift. However, people have noticed that people with 1199 Foundation covers just seem to kind of get away from a traffic ticket. And I'll just I'll I'll leave you with this challenge. Next time you're in traffic, you'll see a Porsche, you'll see a Mercedes, a Ferrari. Notice the plate covers. More often than not, they'll have 1199 foundations, because if you can afford a Porsche, if you can afford a Ferrari, you can make a donation. You put those plate covers. You're gonna be speeding, my dude, right? So when they pull you over, it might just help with the way that they look at you. So classism in America is the biggest problem. It's something that we can prove, and I think it's a good way. It's where we should redirect our attention and our efforts.
Dude, yeah. So, and you know what the thing is too, is that like it's when you hear it like that, it's super, super sound. But when things get politicized, obviously, like you have people who are, I don't even want to speak for them and say that they're very far extreme right. But when the content is put out, it has to be that way because you got to cater to audiences in a more extreme way, right? So, for example, someone like Candace Owens,
Hmm.
who agrees with that point, but like to the extreme where she was like, it's not race at all. It's all classism and culturally, right?
Mhm.
Cultural. And obviously like situations, the variables weigh a little bit more on one side than the other. Every
Right.
situation is different, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a very rational perspective to have because it's like with this, for example, right? It's like, again, I'm just going with the bit for the benefit of the doubt, right? Because I'm just like, that'll get us to the next stage of the conversation on what needs to happen, right? But it's genuine. It genuinely, I think that that's the only thing that it really just makes sense. If like if you were to try to be like, it, I don't disagree with anybody that's like hurt by it. You know what I mean? But it's like you will be scrutinized if you were to be like, I don't think that there's any signs that this had to do with race. The only thing that the only evidence that people have is that, and I'm not saying that it didn't have anything to do with race. I'm just saying that if you were to try to die on that hill only, your only evidence would be that this cop was white and this man was black. You know, and I'm not disagreeing,
Correct.
but it's like, but that's literally the only thing that's there.
Yeah, and again, if you already approach the situation wearing those lenses, right, then that's the way you're going to see it. And um, there has been cases where, again, police officers have been caught by their body cameras saying, racial slurs, in which you can prove racism, right? If a body camera, surveillance camera catches a police officer being vocal, expressing um, um, their racism, all right, then cases, I'm an ally. I say, point to me to the racism. I want to get rid of it, right? I don't think
Exactly.
anyone is advocating for racism, and it's that's not the case, right? But if there is racism or systemic racism, I need just a little bit more than just that generic phrase. I need you to point to me to who is it? Is it the chief? Which staff is it, and what's the proof so that we can demand change, we can remove those officers, et cetera, et cetera. But just saying, systemic racism just isn't enough for change.
Yeah. So you know what okay, so I have other questions I'm going to ask you about like the whole woke culture after this and
Hmm.
especially specifically liberals because when I hear you talk, it seems like you're pretty good at, I don't know what you're like politically, but it seems like you're good at assessing the situation like unemotionally. It sounds to me a little bit like some of the issues you're looking at from a more progressive perspective, not like extreme, but is that am I
Sure.
incorrect with that?
Look, I tend not to um subscribe to a
Same
set of
here.
ideas
Same
just
here.
because, again, you're gonna try to make everything fit. You might go to your channels of information, you'll try to get their perspective and say, huh, I normally align with that person and they're saying this, therefore if I subscribe to their ideas, maybe I should also adopt that idea as well. And I
Yeah.
think it's very easy to get caught up in those, streams of consciousness of parties. So yes, you're right, I tend to always look at things more objectively, because if I was to look at situations that were just so heavy, like the one that we saw with George Floyd, even immigration, abortion, whatever is polarizing, if I look at it from a subjective standpoint, then um, I would have a feeling that I will not be taking other people's feelings into account. Now, that's really what it means to be objective, is when you
Yeah.
think and you try to find the truth outside of yourself, outside of your perspective. And I think it's very healthy for everyone to practice objective problem solving on situations like this.
So looking at this from an objective perspective, this is how I'm looking at it. Like if we take it for face value, what people are telling us, and like I genuinely think that there are people that 100% believe that it was without a doubt only derived from like race, the situation that occurred. Like okay, like I can acknowledge that there are people that is 100% their truth.
Right.
If I take that and I try to run with it, I think about this. I'm like, okay, it's very obvious that we've made strides in the way that we treat black people for this specific scenario, right? Like we
Hmm.
had slaves and then they've went through stuff leading up to this and they're still getting killed by cops, whether it's for race or not, right? But if we're taking it just from the race perspective, I think about this, I'm like, okay, equality is a positive thing. It's a 100% positive thing. And can like positive exist at all without negative? Because like negative is that piece of data that we use to bounce off of to understand what positive is, right? Like
Hmm.
something has to be bad in order for us to know what good is like the perspective I had a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So because stuff has gotten better and like bad stuff continues to happen, we're constantly, or at least woke culture is constantly holding us to a higher standard, which is a good thing, right? We should always be holding ourselves to a higher standard. But has it been to the point to where stuff got better and we held ourselves to a higher standard for a period of time, and now when we break that standard, we react just as I don't want to say irrationally, but just as severely to something that might not have been as big of a deal like 10 years ago. Not referencing this death, because this death is like, I get it. Like they murder somebody. Like
Right.
I'm not trying to downplay this, but I'm speaking overall when we look at race. Stuff has been better and we've accepted that we have this standard. And
Mhm.
because we have gone through periods where we've all looked at the standard and said, that's what we're going to hold ourselves accountable to,
Mhm.
we're reacting just as severely as if it was something terrible that might have happened like 30 years ago or 40 years. Does that make any sense?
No, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I think in order to alleviate hold on, let me just say this. I think what would lend very well to this exercise, this thinking exercise here, is to think of perspective, right? So I think perspective will kind of solidify this feeling of, maybe what we're seeing now is just people being a little bit more um, um what's the word I'm looking for? More observant of when that standard drops, and that's because of relativism, right? Relativism of the prosperity of America and race relations here in America. You're definitely right. They've definitely increased years of segregations in the '60s. So relativism allows us to be stuck in our own bubble and to think, well, because it was this bad here and because it's better now, and if that standard drops, then I'm going to be very, very aware. I'm going to be very aware of that. Now, um, if you take perspective and think about, well, what are the overall resources of people of color in another country, right? The access of education of people of color in, again, another country, you'll realize that, maybe we actually have it pretty well here, right? Like the opportunities we have here, right, versus the opportunities you may have somewhere else where you might actually be persecuted by your skin, and that doesn't necessarily just apply to race. It can also apply to gender, right? And this is
Sure.
what I think a lot of people have a problem jumping on, postmodernist feminism, neo-feminism, where you moved from attaining an objective goal like the right to vote in the 1920s, and now to air conditioning is racist. um so exactly, people naturally chuckle, right? Because like, wow, it's been so good here that now your attention, your efforts now shift to addressing a problem where there's other parts in the world right now where women don't have access to education, where women are still going through um genital mutilation, sexual slavery, et cetera. But of course, here in America, because it's been very prosperous, and people don't like to acknowledge how prosperous it is
No,
in this
not at
country.
all.
This country is not perfect by any means, but it's very prosperous. I come from another country. I'm aware of that. And I think if you speak to a lot of first generation immigrants who immigrated here from another country, they'll tell you they came here for a reason, right? And um, it's very easy for us to just get caught up in our own bubble and then now start to think about, well, Coriolas are racist because their definition of nude is a Caucasian nude. AC, the air conditioning is racist, is sexist. So yeah, I guess I do agree with your notion that prosperity does lead to a certain standard.
You know, it's funny that when you say that too is like, so I grew up in the Central Valley. Central Valley is like tons of people that come from Mexico.
Right.
A lot of people from Michoacan is like where the majority of the people go.
Michoacan, yeah,
Yeah,
they're everywhere. Those guys,
they're because they all come together and they all live
they
together for
do.
a while and then they split up. But the general area, um, so that's where a majority of people are from. But
Yeah.
what I was gonna say is it's funny because when you go to the Bay Area, like it, when they talk about people of color and they say this, they say that. A lot of the time, it's I said earlier, like I don't want to be like expected to think a particular way just because I'm like you know Mexican or Latino, whatever someone looks at me as, right?
Right.
I don't want to be expected to think any particular way. Most of the people that I meet, like older people that come from like Mexico, they're pretty conservative. I don't want to say
Yes.
fiscally, but just dude, like in general, they lean a little bit more right. And I
Yeah.
tell people that and they think that I'm lying, like I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. And I'm like,
Right.
no, like that's like if you were to come where I'm from and meet people,
Right.
you wouldn't agree with them and all of your these standards you're trying to hold people to. They'd probably make you feel kind of dumb.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. I can 100% vouch for that. I Mexicans who immigrate here first generation are predominantly very conservative, and I'd say that's mostly because the values of or what it means to be conservative has shifted, right?
Yeah, of course.
So for some context, growing up, I was as liberal as it gets. I call myself a recovering lefty. I'm still recovering because I still have very lefty knee-jerk reactions to things, right?
uh,
So growing up, when I was 16, 17, was when the Occupy Wall Street movement was
uh,
going on. And when you're a teenager, you're just, you think that you are a superhero and that the world is just riddled with, again, all of these problems that only you can solve. And you were put on this earth. It's very self-centered way to look at the world that teenagers
yeah.
go through. I went through that. And to me, my calling was, it just so happened to be that it was the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I was deep into that, man. Um, I really thought that change was going to come through a Molotov cocktail, and we all had to wear Guy Fawkes mask. And I used to call myself a socialist, male feminist.
Yeah.
So that was my background growing up. I was actually, for the majority of my life, I had liberal values, but as time has gone on and people have become more polarized, my my I realized my values were no longer compatible with neoliberal ideas anymore, and they were seen as conservative. Number one being, and this is where I'm bringing the message of being Mexican, is self-responsibility.
Mm.
Mexicans, they understand this self-responsibility. Whenever you say something to your parents, they will always find a way to make you feel guilty, right? That's how it comes across, right? You're a teenager, you get hurt when you're little, they don't console you. They say that happened to you because you were quote unquote acting dumb. I don't want to get this
Yeah.
video demonetized or anything or give
Yeah.
YouTube a reason to, so I won't actually say the real phrase, but to the equivalent of you brought this upon yourself because of
Mm.
your actions. So you grow up with this sense of self-responsibility. The actions that I take in my life will hand me a certain result, right? So it's very um, Nietzsche, a philosophy of life, right? Where my my actions are going to hand me a result, right? And that's the way you're brought up. So self responsibility is very, very important in Latino culture, and unfortunately, that's one of the things that is no longer compatible with neoliberal ideas because they don't want to hear it. And I've always wanted to stand up for the little guy, right? I think that's what drew me, and that's why I fell in love with liberal principles, is the idea that you want to give a voice to the little dog, or to the little the you cheer for the small dog in the fight. And that's why I wanted to be liberal. Now I'm seeing that in California specifically,
Mm.
especially maybe in New York, liberals are not the little dog, they're the big dog. And when they shut other people up, when they say, hey, you can't express your opinion because you disagree with me, um you're no longer the little dog. When I've heard a really good quote, and it's, when a certain group of people can express their ideas, that's who you know is in power. And um that's where my values kind of shifted. Liberals don't want to hear about self-responsibility because they think you are being racist or sexist. And yeah, I think that's very dangerous.
I hate getting lost into like for a little while, especially dude, like working in the Bay, like in a work setting, it's different, right? Because you have to be conscious of like the fact that like people are going to take these as what they call microaggressions, and they're going to run with them, and they will put a very surface level perspective on you for anything. Not saying everyone, but the majority of people are like that around the Bay. At least what I've noticed. This is a big generalization, but I'm okay with making a generalization. Um,
Yeah.
it happens. The part that I started like freaking myself out a bit on was like, wait, why am I letting this like dictate the way that I speak, and why am I like if all these people are telling me that people of color are oppressed and this and that, I'm like, wait a second, like I should be able to speak louder than them, but I can't. Just be. It's like they're preaching for people that that might kind of like have the same background as me or the same blood or look like me or whatever. But they're also not like gonna validate me or make me feel good if I have a different opinion. They're kind of willing to say, "No, you're wrong. We know a little bit more than you. Like you just basically haven't learned enough yet, or whatever it may be."
Right. There's a good quote that goes, if you ever want to know what it's like to be a minority and be discriminated against, just disagree with a white liberal and they'll show you. So
It's very
um
true.
it's, yeah, I have a big problem with that, because this is one of the things I experienced while I was down at in Santa Barbara.
Oh, is that where you
The
went to school?
Yeah, that's where I was going for a bit.
Nice. Okay, cool.
And I used to live out there, and there was a certain political um feeling and ambiance brewing there, and I would get a lot of um, expectations from white liberals who would expect me to think a certain way. And when I disagreed with them, they'd have that like, huh, that's funny. You're Latino. Why do you say that? And it just didn't sit right with me at that time, that I was like, hey, you can't expect people to think a certain way just because I'm Latino. That's almost literally what prejudice is. You're
Yeah,
prejudging me and you're expecting me to be a certain way because of the way I look. And it only got worse and worse. And now it's like, if you're gay, you have to fall in line with LGBT views, right? If you're Latino, you better fall in line with your immigration views. If you're a woman, oh boy, you better fall in line. And if you're, just in general of color, then you better not be a race traitor, right? And a lot of the time, these messages are not necessarily pushed down by other folks like you. They're usually passed down by white liberals, and I just think that that's actually what's referred to as the soft bigotry of low expectations, right? It's when people, especially white liberals, just regard minorities as just very little, right? Like, of course you're oppressed. You're Latino, you're black. Of course you don't have access to resources, right? And
yeah.
I just think that's I don't know, very problematic.
How fresh do you get frustrated over the fact that people call themselves out on their white privilege? Because
Yes, I do,
I
because
hate it.
I hate it. I hate it as well, because um, it's, and not only does it not come across as genuine to me, it's one of those things where, as someone who is Latino, I don't want empathy. I'm not looking for compassion. I don't want your submission. And this is something that, unfortunately, because the rhetoric has been reinforced onto white people, that they are somehow just guilty for being white. They'll say things like, you benefit from the system. You are just being white. You are already above. It's been ingrained. They've been indoctrinated for so long that they grow up almost hating themselves with self-hate. And what they become is just submissive. I don't want that. I don't want them appears to be submissive of me. I don't want them to treat me differently because I am Latino. And I don't think most people want that, but it's just the left, their indoctrination is just, it's really, really, really toxic, especially towards white people, man. It's, I couldn't, I can't stand it, man. And this is no lie, this 100% true. I was at a gender studies class at UCSB. I was crashing. I really wanted to hear this professor. She's very famous. Her name is Grace Chang. And a white person, I remember, it was like this white girl. She got up and left, and she was crying. And the professor said something on the lines to the entire class. She addressed the class saying, she's here crying because she cannot, something, I'm kind of paraphrasing here. She cannot deal with the fact that she has so much white privilege, and she's carrying this entire burden. And I couldn't believe it. It's like, this professor was up there addressing the entire class, belittling someone just based on their skin color. And this person obviously had an emotional response, and her instinct was to double down on it and make her an example. And there was other, now my thing is, how does that affect the other white people in that class? So if you have a problem being labeled the perpetrator or something, you better not express that, because this is how we're going to treat you. And that just didn't sit right with me. Again, I just, for the values that I was fighting, that I believed in, and standing up for the little guy, I'm like, you sure don't speak like a little guy to me. Like, you sound very oppressing right now, right? So Yeah.
It's so I have like something not that extreme, but it's funny to hear that because it's like you're prefacing it with like I promise I'm telling the truth, and it doesn't even sound surprising to me. Honestly, I'm
Oh,
like,
okay.
oh yeah, okay. So it's funny that you say it, but there's some people out there that might be like, did that really happen? I'm just like I see so much stupid crap on the internet that I'm like, oh man, that sucks. You had to see that in person, but
Yeah.
I was at a Christmas party for Karina's work like a year and a half ago, and like very mixed office, like of
Mhm.
everybody, and but the girl sitting across from me, her and her boyfriend were there, and she was white, and I was talking about how like I just got my 23andMe back, my parents did or whatever, and I was finding out how much I was of everything. And I made
Mhm.
a joke, and I was just like, "Oh, like, I'm pretty much what I thought I was." And they're like, "What are you?" And I was like, "I'm brown." Like,
Mhm.
even though I'm not, I got like fair skin, but that was like the
Sure,
joke I
sure,
thought
sure.
I was making.
Uh-huh.
And then they kind of laughed, but they were like they felt uncomfortable not knowing if they should laugh at it or not, but I'm like, I'm making a joke. And then the girl that was sitting there across from us had basically said like, I don't want to do that because I feel like I shouldn't, like, as a, like, basically, again paraphrasing, as a white person, like I have like privilege to where I don't feel like I need to know that I'm more white or that I'm this and I'm that. And I
Mhm.
specifically told her, I'm like, hey, like I'm not gonna think that like you don't have any right to figure out about your bloodline. Like you
Mhm.
shouldn't feel like that either. I'm just letting you know from someone who is not white. Like
Right.
you do your thing. Like no one's
Right.
gonna. I don't think that you're weird for that. I'm not gonna think you're a bad person for that. And she straight up told me, but no, I should check myself on all of this because blah 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 blah. All these irrelevant reasons, honestly.
Yeah, that's very sad to see, man. It's I have a lot of white friends that deal with that white guilt, and they've just sort of become submissive. And actually, I had a discussion with one of them on Instagram after I made that video, and I posted that video. They had reached out to me, and they were like, "Oh, I was kind of hit again with that. Like, how can you think this way? You are, once again, a white liberal telling me how I should think based on my skin
Yeah,
color." And again, I get the sense that because they've just been indoctrinated with this notion that because they're white, they are inherently walking on this earth above everyone else, that they should repent for that. And if they become submissive to us, then therefore they will get some sort of moral high ground, or they will be forgiven, or something of that extent. It's really weird, and
yeah.
it's really sad to hear. White people just have all that self hate. I don't want that. I don't want submissive peers. I don't want any of that. I don't want to be treated differently. I don't want you to build me a different table. I want to sit at the table with everyone else, right? So it's crazy.
It's funny too, and like we don't have to go into this that much, but just like if you're listening to this and like you don't have a lot of like I have a lot of Mexican friends, I got a lot of like Indian friends, Middle Eastern friends, people who are first generation, their parents, not everybody, and I don't mean this in a vindictive way or a violent way. I mean
Mhm.
this just like culturally, people that have came over from other countries are probably like the most racist. And I don't mean that like they're going to call people the N word or
No,
they're
no,
going to
no.
call
Right, right,
slurs,
right.
but the way that they look at things, like
Yeah, a certain
it's very a lot of
like
stereotypes.
yes, they have already have some pre-built prejudices, and that's just because a lot of countries have them, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
um that's one of the reasons why I just cannot support just a blanket statement like
Mhm.
anti-Semitic racism, because I don't look at racism as something to eradicate, because I am past that. I am past this idealistic perspective on race that we can just eliminate racism. And I think a lot of black folks reached out to me, and they were like, dude, 100%, I agree with you. We're never going to get rid of racism. Racism is in every culture and almost every country. And instead, we should just look at reality for what it is, and we should come after the issue for what it is, right? Police brutality for what it is, right? We can make change, and we can have um, legislation that improves the way police handle situations. But yeah, so of course, other people come here from other countries that already have these pre-built prejudices of certain racial groups. And look, I'll be the first one to admit I'm not above it. I understand my own capacity to have prejudices, and I understand that. Look, we've all been with friends, and there's absolutely no one watching right now that is a god floating above us who can say, I have never once made any racist joke. I have never in my ever in my head thought anything negative of any other race, because you're lying, right? Be honest with yourself. Understand your own capacity to be hurtful and to be just hurtful to others. I understand mine, and that's why I know prejudices are always going to exist. The thing we can do is just make sure we have a system in place that just allows there to be less of that, and doesn't, so that it doesn't manifest itself in the way that we saw George Floyd's death.
Oh, definitely. My the group chat that I've been in with my best friends for like the last 7 years, like literally 7 years straight. It's a couple Middle Eastern guys, black guy, and my brother, and then another Mexican character. And like, dude,
Mhm.
if people were to read some of the stuff in that chat from everybody, they'd
Yeah.
want to kick us out of the country or something,
Oh yeah,
dude.
absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
bad.
Me and my friends, me and my Indian friends. I have my best friend. He's black. We go back and forth, and we crack these jokes, and it's that's beautiful, man. I think that's so beautiful for us to just be able to make fun of our differences, love our differences, and there's just some people that just want to perverse that, and they want to, I don't know, float above us, like if there are these righteous people and say that is never okay. It's not okay for you to, and that's not okay, man. And that's why a lot of these people who want to control thoughts, what I call thought police, they want to control comedy, because comedy is something that you cannot control, right? When you laugh, it's your body reacting to something that you found, that you enjoy, that was funny. And how many times have we enjoyed the content that Dave Chappelle has put out? I love Dave Chappelle's content, right? And a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
that is race based. And I just think it's beautiful, man, that we can all just, be together. We should be able to laugh at each other's differences without feeling this sort of guilt that, again, just thought police, that they want us to feel guilty for.
No, definitely. So to pivot away from this,
Hmm.
and not entirely, I guess it all falls in the same boat because this is generally what people are talking about right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not a Trump guy.
Hmm.
I didn't vote for him. I'm not going to vote for him.
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. But I'll preface it with that. I also want to say that I don't think Trump's the devil either. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Yeah.
you can pick and choose depending on what he's done, like what's positive, what's not positive. But I'm not like somebody, I hate being put in the position by people to have to defend a guy because I disagree with something that someone says, and their go-to is always like, oh, well, basically they just corner you to try to like defend Trump, and it's just like it's so stupid. But give me a second, real quick. I think we're disconnecting, so I want to make sure that the connection is good enough to record.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine.
All right, cool. So with everything that's happening today, what do you think about that? Because this is how I see it, dude. Like, I don't think the extreme left is trying to start a race war. Like, there's a lot of conspiracy theorists that are saying that. I
Right.
definitely think that the very extreme left is kind of they're not glad this is happening, but it is something they're using as ammunition. And I think what happened was Trump today, like he's kind of had some victories in the sense of like he's kind of been getting past the things that they have been throwing at him. And I feel
Hmm.
like today was like the first like big battle he actually lost, and they kind of checked him a little bit. Like if we were playing chess, it was just they didn't checkmate him, but he kind of like had to fall on his sword a little bit to be like,
Right.
I gotta send the military out here. I have to make a decision that not even even the conservative people that agree with him, they're like, yeah, we want to make sure that these riots are not as violent anymore. But from like just a strictly right
Hmm.
perspective, they're like this. We don't like this. I feel like
Right.
the left kind of checked him like that a little bit.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I 100% agree with you, man. I think just you saying that he's not the devil is enough for, the left mob to come and, and demand you to get canceled just for
Right.
not agreeing with them on that. And I get a lot of heat from my fellow dreamer community and the DACA community just because I don't look at Trump as a boogeyman, and I too feel the same way as you do, where I'm not necessarily a supporter, but sometimes I do kind of empathize with him, just because
Yeah.
naturally the position that he's in as president, he's in a lot of lose situations where there is no right answer. Right, his approach to coronavirus, there was people who were going to be mad, and there was people who were going to be. And they actually ended up being from both sides, right? Conservatives were mad at how long he kept the country shut down,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
liberals were mad that he didn't keep it closed enough, right? So that's one of the scenarios where no matter what he was going to do, people were just going to give him, crap
Of
for it.
course.
Same thing with the riots now. You're 100% right, right? So if you're a liberal, you might think he's adding fuel to the fire by sending in the troops. This is clearly not what we want. This is the opposite. And maybe if you're a business owner, or if maybe you're just a little bit more rational, you might look at it as, he's a president. He has to do something,
Mhm.
right? He cannot just sit back and allow people to express themselves violently. He has
Exactly.
businesses to protect. His job isn't to necessarily protect protesters. His job is to protect the entire country, right? So you also have to look at it that way. So of course, he's often put in these situations where it's a lose-lose. And again, I'm able to parse that and look around, and that's when I realize certain media organizations, they're never going to give him a fair shot.
Yeah,
Never.
of course not.
It's always going to be a lose-lose. Trump did this, Trump did that. Friends, same thing. Oh, Trump did this, and they never want to acknowledge that the situation just itself is a lose-lose situation. Or when he does something that I think is fairly decent, people don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want to acknowledge it because they've already made up their mind. They made up their mind since 2015 when he announced that he was going to run for president, and he said that not everyone from Mexico is a good person, right? Sometimes they're rapists, et cetera, et cetera. Since then, people have made up their mind. This guy is not the guy, and now again we go back to that concept of, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. So you look at it through that lens, everything he does is just gonna, it's a cycle. He's bad, he's racist. So there's a really good quote by I believe her name is Casey Joyce, that says when we start to humanize our enemy, we are dehumanized by our own community in return. And that just hits home with me, because every time I try to understand and rationalize and just even humanize Trump, because everyone looks at Trump as, again, the devil or this entity that's just evil, I go, he's not. I don't think I don't think he has bad intentions. And people want to, and then call me a traitor in return. They want to say, and if you're black, you're going to be called worse things, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really toxic, man. Really, really, really toxic.
With all of the riots and stuff that were happening, because this is what your original video was on, and I want to
Hmm.
talk about these specifically too, because like I like that you brought the boxing, I had brought the Floyd
Right.
thing up earlier, because I look at combat like, well, because I think of physical deployment of violence as a form of combat, right? So, like, even rioting and looting stores, even though you're not physically hurting people, it is a step in the system of combat to lead up to some physical conflict with
Sure.
somebody else. That's how I
Hmm.
look at it, from like a tactical, strategic standpoint. So, I was looking at all these situations, and I was like, okay, I understand the sentiment behind it. Um, I liked when you brought up the correlation and causation thing, because, like, I was feeling that way, but I was like, okay, regardless, I still don't agree with these people destroying like small business and local economies and whatnot. There's some very obvious things that are cons that are going to come from that, and we'll see them play out. Um, but I was
Right.
looking at this, and I all I kept thinking was like, okay, these people, I understand that they're upset and they want to fight, and but they don't have the bandwidth to win a fight. And the only thing that kept going through my head, it was like so unemotional. I'm like, you don't start a fight that you don't have the bandwidth to win, or you don't fight someone in a way that you cannot win that fight. So, like for MMA, you're not going to go out and take a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt
Right.
down if you're like a great boxer. You're just not going to do that. And if you're fighting someone bigger than you out of your weight class, again, you're first of all, you shouldn't be fighting them in the first place, right? That's what
Of
my
course.
point would be. But you will, if you have to, you are going to fight them differently. And I think that they approached the situation head on, like just full blown, ready to go, like they were just gonna throw haymakers, and thought
Hmm.
that they were gonna get a message across. Or honestly, I don't know what the message was that they were trying to get across. I understood the sentiment, but
Hmm.
from a tactical and strategic point, looking at combat, I knew that it was going to lead up to what it was today. It's pretty obvious. We all knew that, but I don't know what they're so surprised about.
Right, right. And I think that just goes to the fact that just the entire movement is not organized. It lacks leadership, it lacks a clear message. And I agree with you on that. I agree that you have to pick your battles wisely. You have to be strategic. And that's why in my video I said, we can reflect on very effective activism in the past, right? Women's suffrage, 1920, civil rights of the 1960s, and even the gay marriage movement here in California in 2007, um, that actually gave us very, very powerful and meaningful legislation, right? They had a leader. They had a clear objective measure. They were able to point to a law and say, we want that changed. And they were able to get change, right? and then I gave a good example of a horrible example of bad activism, right? So just a terrible example of activism, and that was the Occupy Wall Street movement, right? That was my introduction to politics at that time, as when I was 17. There was no leadership, right? There was no clear leader of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and there was no clear demand. And when people were asked, when a microphone would be given to them, and when they were asked the question, "What do you want?" a lot of them would say, well, we need distribution of wealth. Others would say, well, we need to get money out of politics. And then another group of people would just flat out say, no, we need communism. We need to rewrite the American Constitution like they did in Iceland, because, for some reason they were in love with Iceland and they use them as a model.
Yeah.
So there was no clear message, nothing, and nothing came of it, right? The police were able to kind of hold them back off long enough, and the whole thing just fell apart. And the world was watching. At the time, people were saying, hey, this is the civil rights movement of our generation. But because they lack leadership, because they lack a clear demand, nothing came out of it. I'm afraid it's the same thing here, right? There's no leadership. There's no a structure of anybody leading. There's no demand. So it'd be one thing to say, guys, these are the people leading the movement. These are the areas that we're going to target with vandalism or looting. This is what we're going to do on a certain day, and this is what we're going to demand for. This is law. We've drafted our own proposal. We're going to take this to Congress. We're going to call our representatives. None of that. We're not seeing any of that. Looting a Target is not part of anything. There's absolutely no reason why you need to take 3 flat screen TVs. That links to no political advancing at all, right? So there's no leadership, man. There's nothing. I can't just blindly support something, right, like this movement, just because it's symbolic. And I'm not going to be bullied into it and made feel ashamed by white liberals because I am of a certain skin color. I'm not. So I can't support it for that reason.
I'm glad that there is some potential to these riots being slowly simmered down, because
Right.
dude, I'm like, I think about this. I think about Minneapolis, right? So Minneapolis is like 500,000 people generally about there, and the median income there is 50 grand, and I'm like, that across 500,000 people, that's really not that much money at all. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, there's a lot of, it's pretty obvious that there's a lot of that poverty is in pockets there at a very high volume.
Right.
So all I kept thinking was like, man, if you're going to loot a Target, like Brian Cornell's the CEO of Target. That guy he's got like 10 million in stock that comes in every year. Probably got like 10 million in salary plus whatever bonuses. He makes 30 to 40 million a year. Mm-hmm. That guy's going to be okay. All those people that were making 10 to 15 bucks an hour at Target, those are the people that are going to be out of jobs. I also kept thinking like, man, the supply chain at one Target in a place like that is huge. Like, people don't understand that the infrastructure that takes a hit, that you might be out of food for a little bit, even with just one store, but across a whole neighborhood, city, Main Street, whatever it was in Minneapolis specifically, they are going to definitely feel the impacts from it. And if you are saying that if you're saying something is systemically against you already, who are you going to go to when you need to eat or when you need more work? Exactly, are you just going to move on? What's going to happen?
Exactly, 100%. And it's one of the things that we go back to my Floyd Mayweather comparison here is when you are just reacting, you're not thinking, right? You're not thinking about the results. You're just reacting with your emotions. And that unfortunately puts you in a vulnerable position, like where we are now, right? The looting of the Target wasn't going to solve anything. And now the people that were coming back to work from this whole shelter in place are now going to be told, hey, I'm sorry, but we're going to close the store now. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the Targets are now closed nationwide in the attempt to not get them, looted and stuff like that. So that's just tragic, right? CVS is Walgreens. If you have a medication to collect for a certain pre-existing condition, something like that, right? Good luck trying to find that, because now you've put those people that are at high risk in a very vulnerable position. All those businesses that are, the smaller businesses, like you mentioned, loans are not forgiven, right? Loans are not, right? They still have to pay those loans. They still have to pay the rent. And that's very tragic as it is already. How hard is it maybe to get a loan if you're Black, right? And if you're a Black business owner, now your store got looted. It got broken into. it's so sad, man. And these are the things that you don't take into account when you just react, right? So you have to be able to think, stop and think before anything. The no good decision ever comes from reacting, ever. You just have to think first.
That's how I was thinking about that too. I'm like, there was enough empathy going around, I felt, and like all the stuff I was like throwing it out on Facebook and everyone was like, are you with us or against us? Do you care or don't you care? I'm like, listen, I care. I feel
Right.
like my empathy is not gonna add anything to this if I had enough of it for people's standards in the first place, you know? So
Yeah.
it just was just crazy. Do you think how intense do you think this curfew is going to be where it's like implemented hard? Do you think we're going to go through this for like maybe a week, 2 weeks? What do you think about
Well,
this?
yeah. Well, here in San Jose, they've announced it's going to go on for 7 days.
Mhm.
I believe tomorrow, the city council is going to get together and evaluate the situation and see if maybe they'll need to extend it. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think they'll need to. I
I don't
think
either.
7 days is enough for the movement to kind of wash down as people. Remember, these are all just fake activists. At the end of the day, I call them fake activists. They saw
Yeah.
a post on Instagram and they wanted to go be part of something. And I know because that was me at that age. I know it. I understand where they're coming from, right? So next week, when something else happens, they're gonna be on their phones. You're not gonna have this passion anymore. And what we're seeing right now is just a mob of Instagram activists that want to shame others, and they think that they've achieved some sort of moral high ground because they've empathized and blindly validated a certain community of color, and therefore I'm a good person now. Hey, I validated this group of people. I'm a good person now. Now I'm gonna go shame others who are not good like me, right? So um, these people don't have that passion that will allow them to carry a protest longer than 7 days. So I guess to answer your question, I don't see it going beyond 7 days. I might be wrong, but let's see. And I think that plus the addition of the troops just might be enough to deter a few folks from going out there.
Basically, this is basically how I feel about it. I can't see it. Once you have ammunition that has come into play as the variable, I kind of feel like, okay, this is a fight that it's gonna be very apparent that you can't keep trying to butt heads in, you know, so
Yeah, but if I do want to offer some positivity because I did make this Instagram post and I didn't just want to rant. I didn't just want to
no,
contribute
okay,
an
yeah.
opinion. I want to bring forward a solution, which is more than most can say. They just want to go on and they just want to validate and sympathize with people. I actually want to put forward a an objective goal that I think we can all get to. And I highlighted three goals. Number one, um we need to address police brutality, right? We have a
Definitely.
problem with police brutality. We have a problem with the way that police are just, they seem incompetent at de-escalating situations. We have these, shoot first, ask question later. um so I want to address that by number one, demilitarizing police. We have to take into account that the local police, they're not SWAT. They're not meant to be SWAT. A lot of the times they're not prepared and they're not properly trained to have a lot of the gear that they do have. So typically a police officer carries, or they have the handgun, they have the shotgun in the car, and then they have the assault rifle in the trunk. I think that's a good place to start, the demilitarization of the police. Number two, I think it's important to start with every time that somebody dies within police custody, that should trigger a federal investigation, an objective investigation. Their police department should not deal with deaths in police custody at all. And we need that in writing. And then the third one was continuous social media audits and mental evaluation for all officers. Getting a mental evaluation at the time that you enter the academy is not good enough anymore. That is not. There can be plenty of experiences that one can go through, especially on the force. There might be some things you witness, et cetera, that might lead to some sort of, you know, um, a mental breakdown or anything of that nature. And we need to get all officers evaluated continuously, right? And then also the social media audits, right? This is to make sure that and by the way, immigrants already do this, right? If you're trying to become a citizen, right, the government needs to vet you. They need to vet your ideas. They want to make sure that when you get to this country, you don't have any um, ideas that might not be compatible with American ideas, any harmful, violent ideas. We need to hold police to that same standard, right? Make sure that they are not spewing negative things online, that there's nothing of concern that would lead us to believe that the communities that they have sworn to protect are going to be vulnerable. So I think those three goals there are pretty good. It's a good place to start if we can get some legislation to improve those. And I think we can start there. And I think everything else, because it's correlation, we would see an improvement of that.
No, dude, it's funny hearing you talk because I'm like, man, it makes so much sense. And then also for everyone listening, just so you know, because so people don't take it and run with it either. He's saying this is a place to start. Don't listen to this and be like, oh well, what about this? What about that? Like the way everyone else does.
Right,
I
right,
think this
right.
is a
And
very good foundation to build off of if we were theoretically to try to put something in place.
yes, it's a good place to start. And just like you said, this is I am by no means saying this is going to solve all our problems. Racism is going to go away. Police brutality, absolutely not. And we need to be able to act swiftly on individual cases where racism is present in the police force. We need to make sure that we remove those individuals. And yeah, so it's a place to start. And if anybody wants to add to that, and anybody wants to contribute to that, by all means, I think this is something that we need to be pushing for. And the sooner we start that for demanding that, then the better, and the sooner we'll get results.
Okay. Random wild card question that we could probably not. I'm not really stuck to any time limit, but I figured
Yeah.
this could go on however long you want to go on. But
Yeah. Same here. I made enough time.
all right, cool. How do you think this, dude? I don't think that this is going to affect. It's going to affect the election. Everything comes into the election, but
Yeah.
I'm under the impression that I don't feel like. I feel like a lot of people know what happened was wrong on both sides. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to affect the outcome of the election that much. I'm under the impression if I had to be a betting man, I would say Trump is probably going to win again. Historical
Yes.
data, just pretty simple conversations that you can go read on the internet if you were going to scrape for keywords and whatnot, right?
Right.
What do you think about this? Like this impact on the election generally, what do you think?
No, I think ultimately Trump's still going to win. I felt that since the day that Joe Biden had announced that he was going to run. I was like, oh my God, they're going to make him the nominee. I got into so many debates with people, and I want to point out, just like yourself, I supported Andrew Yang. I have my hat here, right?
Good
So
stuff.
as you know, as conservative and right wing as I get labeled online, I recognize Andrew Yang, and he was competent. He was honest, and above all, again, he was very competent. He wasn't selling us an idea that I felt was unattainable. I really liked him as a candidate, and he was somebody that I could get behind. Now, as soon as I heard Joe Biden was going to get in the race, I'm like, there it goes. There's the DNC's ticket, and that's when I knew Trump's going to win. Trump is going to dismantle this man. Everything that has happened since has just reinstated that position of mine. All of these gaffes, which is what CNN likes to call, where he's clearly showing some signs of problems with his memory, possibly dementia, just kind of reinforces that idea. And however, does the recent protests kind of not lend itself well to Trump? I don't know. It's hard to say. I do see Joe Biden bringing this up because Joe Biden has a lot of making up to do to the Black community. As of recent, what was it, like a week and a half ago? He just said
Yeah.
that that gaffe. Once again, I'll call it gaffe because that's not what that was. Where he said if you're having a hard time deciding between me and Trump, then you're not Black, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yikes. That's a big yikes, man. I can't believe you just said that. So he has a lot of making up to do. I can see him, trying to throw this back at Trump. I think ultimately, it's just a lot of people are polarized. And if you're a Trump supporter, you're going to be very passionate to go on, wake up that November morning and head out to vote or have mail-in ballots if you're in California. But no one's going to be passionate to vote for Joe Biden. And I'll say this, right? Again, let me add my disclaimer before all of the libs come for me, right? My horse in the race was Andrew Yang. That was my horse in the race.
Same here.
If it comes down to Trump and Joe Biden, I don't think Joe Biden is a better candidate than Trump. I do not. I'm sorry. I will say it out loud. I would prefer to have 4 more years of Trump than a Joe Biden presidency. I'm just going to say objectively. Now, subjectively, I could be like, yo, Trump is, anti the DACA community, and I don't like him just because of that, because I'm a one issue voter, right? But I don't look at things subjectively, and I would just, if I had to evaluate the situation objectively, I don't think Joe Biden is a better candidate than Trump, no
No,
matter how you slice it and dice it.
I don't either, and that's not trying to put emphasis on how good of a candidate Trump is either.
Exactly, exactly.
It's just man, it's you got to call it for what it is, right? It's just
Absolutely.
it's
I made a list of people I'd rather have before Joe Biden.
oh yeah.
I number one, of course, Andrea on top of the list. Unfortunately, I'd rank Joe Exotic before Joe Biden. I think I'd rather have a Joe Exotic presidency.
All right. So and then another thing too, on this idea of Trump. What do you think about Trump's decision with what he's doing? What would you have done if you were president? We want to say what do you think about Trump's decision? What would you have done? What would you have done with all of
Well,
this? Because I don't know what I have done. Honestly, I'm like, man, this is hard.
it is. It's very hard. Like I said, you're in a lose-lose situation. What you want to do is your actions should just minimize the damage.
Mhm.
One of my biggest criticisms of Trump is that he just seems to not be emotionally equipped to handle these situations, and he prematurely heads to Twitter to kind of rant. Where I just think it doesn't do him any favors. When even though he's right on a lot of things, he comes out and he says things that he shouldn't say, and it it allows people it gives people the ammunition to dismiss his message or his correct stance on something, and just say, oh, this guy's a clown, this guy's a joke, he clearly doesn't want to. So I think what he did, where he antagonized people by calling the looters thugs, so on and so forth, again, he could be right, whether you want to think that that's objectively criminal behavior or not. But what he did was not strategically well, right? If you're looking up if you're facing a re-election, you don't call the looters thugs, right? So I did not like the way he handled that. Now, on the aspect of sending in the troops, he has to bring law and order. It's his job, whether people like it or not. If anyone's watching this video and thinks that Trump is bad for bringing in the troops, I'm sorry, but that is his job, right? If this was an Obama presidency, and let me put it to the way liberals might understand, a bunch of white people were out rioting and stuff, you would want Barack Obama to bring law and order to this country as well, right? So it doesn't matter who the protesters are objectively. Trump is not doesn't or he doesn't he's he's not entitled to only protect protesters. He has to protect the entire country. So on that note, I just think he has to go through maybe an apology tour where he goes and he just needs to sympathize a little bit more. I agree with him on some things, right? He's right on some things when he calls out the media, when he does this and that, but he just needs to do just a better job at empathizing with others. And he did a little bit, at the beginning when he was asking for justice for George Floyd. And by the way, a lot of liberals didn't want to acknowledge that. They just
No,
looked the
not
other
at
way when
all.
he tweeted that. Yeah, so maybe he can improve in that.
Yeah, that's how I kind of feel about Joe. Like he could improve in. It's so weird, right? The truth and facts are very important. Just they have just as much of a utility as communication does and context, right? And some people
Yes,
think that context and communication doesn't matter as long as the facts are there. Then that's the truth. And it's like, no, they're all ingredients in the same recipe. When you're trying to,
right.
the main goal of dialogue is to basically try to get the other side to understand you at least a little bit. So that's my gravity, because it's true. He does say a lot of things that are they're factually accurate, and they're his truth for sure, and a lot of times they are truth across the board, but because we get stuff that's politicized, it doesn't get acknowledged, or they just get shot down and twisted or whatever. But I feel the same way. He doesn't
Right.
he
And
doesn't
again, and again, he can be right. So
yeah.
and a lot of the times he is right, but just from a strategical point of view, there are ways to get that point across effectively and ways to do it not effectively, right? So I just think that his choices of words do not allow him to get that message across.
Dude, it's I'll never forget, because I laughed at it. And I'm not saying it was appropriate, but I was just like, my God, like they asked him about the woman. I don't know if it was a woman that he had allegedly assaulted or whatever. I don't know the
Uh-huh.
background of it. And he said no, but his when they asked him his reasoning, he goes, she's not my type. And I'm like,
No, no, no.
oh,
Listen,
or
listen.
no, what did he say? What did he say?
No, 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 no. Hold on. I just want to say this. I want to add. I I find the man incredibly entertaining.
Oh, of course.
I think he is so entertaining, and If you don't like him, anything he tweets, you're gonna sit there with your arms crossed. You're gonna be like, "Oh, Trump said it again." But I myself, who can disagree and can agree with him on certain things, I look at that and I find it to be incredibly. He is, man, this guy's undefeated. Though you throw something at him, he's over there, pop, pop, pop. He's rolling with the punches. Nothing lands on this man. It's like when he did that famous Megan Kelly was like, you've called women dogs and pigs, blah 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 blah, and she, at that moment, do you backtrack and say, you apologize? You say sorry. That's what a politician would do. This man went up there and said, no, only Rosie O'Donnell. What a guy, man! What a guy! This guy, he's undefeated. He's undefeated in that term. So he's
today when he gave that speech, and then I got done listening to the speech. I was like, he didn't say anything that crazy. And he was going to head over to that church that got vandalized, the historical one that's close to the yard.
Right.
Most of the presidents, everywhere they go across that whole territory, they get in a car and they ride in the SUV and they drive. Right. This dude just chest out, no cares, just walked across the lawn. I was savage. Like, my God,
he's a savage, man. When the intention when the whole tension with Iran was increasing there and it was boiling up, people were concerned. They're like, oh my God, Iran's going to start a war with us. The man tweeted, what war has Iran won? And I was like, oh my God, this guy just he's a savage. He's a savage. He doesn't care. Definitely, he rolls with the punches very well, and this is what makes him so dangerous. We're looking at the party. His opposition is a party that believes in being polished and empathizing with others, and this guy is the boogeyman to them because he looks at things straight in the face and says, "Yeah, so what? What are you going to do about it? I'm this way, and there's nothing you could do about it." And the left, the media, they hate this man. They're like, oh my God, how can he be this way and not empathize and be politically correct? And that's what makes him such a great candidate. And that's what people don't understand. The more unpresidential he acts, the better candidate he is. This is why I thought Bernie and Trump were perfect foils for each other. 2016, I'll also add this. I supported Bernie. I can't vote because I'm a DACA recipient, so I did the next best thing, which was donate.
Nice.
And I donated to Bernie. But just as what drew me to Bernie was the way that he spoke, right? He didn't speak like a normal politician. He was very outspoken. He was very vocal. He would just say things straight to the point. This is what I believe. This is what we need. And, every politician before has been failing because they have, like Hillary Clinton, a public opinion and a private opinion. Trump, as this foil, is almost this exact same way, right? He expresses himself a lot differently. He tells you, I am not a politician. We know he's not a politician. And that's refreshing, right? That is refreshing for a lot of people who feel that they can no longer trust politicians. Here's a man who is telling you he's not a politician. He's not going to, sharpen up. And people just find that very, it resonates with them.
It's definitely very, just the humanistic side of it, right? Super relatable, very candid. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's very candid and relatable.
And he has jokes, man. The man has an ability to just roll with the punches, like,
dude. He can roast. He can roast well. He's pretty quick witted.
He is. Yeah, and he'll write in all caps to like a savage. Fake.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think we disconnected a little bit, but I heard you say he writes in all caps. I'm like, that's the best thing I've heard about him all day.
Yes.
Yeah, but that is so true. That's so true.
I heard once, and I don't know if it's verified or not, but I heard once from, I guess, a staffer claim that he drinks 12 cans of Diet Coke per day. I was like, yo, if I was his opponent, that man is a savage. I don't want to go against any man that drinks 12 cans of Diet Coke a day. Like, that man is a savage. That's probably what keeps him wired all day long. And
dude, I'll never forget. They played it on, like, I forget one of the late night shows, but they showed like a 5-second clip of him after he like got done doing like a video, and they had to bleep out something he said because I don't know what he said. They bleeped it out, but when he gets done, he's just like, okay, bleep, bleep, bleep. I just go off. I'm like, that's hilarious, man. This guy's
entertaining. He's entertaining.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. Yeah, man. I appreciate you being on here. I definitely want to have you on again because I have some other questions that I want to hear your opinion on that are kind of related socially, and but they get politicized too much. So I'd love to have a conversation about them some other time. But man, thank you for doing this, dude. If you guys don't know, I hit Vlad up like last minute, and I was like, "Hey, man, I want you to be on my podcast. Like, I
Yeah.
like your opinion on stuff." And he was just super cool with it. Just like, "All right, let's do it."
Yeah. Well, Devin, I just got to say thank you for having me on. And the way I look at it is we got to strike the iron while it's hot, right? This is a issue that is currently going on. We need to get our ideas out there. Um, and also, yeah, if you know, there's just so many things to talk about, and somehow you'll realize like a lot of this stuff is interconnected, like you said, right? Like the concept of self responsibility, accountability, polarizing political ideas, all of these things are just part of a system that has um, culminated this environment where people feel, you know, very extreme about their ideas. So anyways, yeah, I'm looking forward to having more discussions and continuing those conversations.
Where's everyone? Where can everyone find you? I'm gonna link in the descriptions anyway. But where can everyone find you at, man?
They could find me on tuesdaymonday.com. I'm gonna launch a YouTube channel. I have a bunch of clips. I've
Nice.
interviewed a few people. I'm gonna put things together, and yeah, so hopefully people are gonna be able to find me.
Good stuff. And then everybody, if you guys are listening, I'd really appreciate it to follow Vlad and also subscribe to me. You don't realize how much a follower subscription really like it means a lot. You know what I mean? So we're getting up there. Also, I don't ask you guys to donate to the Patreon, but it is there. And if you guys do, then I really appreciate that as well. So we're gonna head out of here. Thank you for all of you that stuck around to the end, even if you fast forward through parts of it. That's cool too. And I will see you guys next time. Good stuff, man. It
Yeah,
was
good
good.
stuff, man.